Color Theory and Color Pencil Part 1. We are going to begin this lesson and follow along with the video. We're going to create a color wheel blends with only the 3 primary colors. So I want you to make sure you have your true blue, your red, and your yellow from the 12 set. So first we want to make sure that we sharpen each one of our pencils. So make sure you have a really good hand sharpener. And it's really important to have a good hand sharpener because we want to have a very fine sharpened tip, especially if we're creating something that's close to realism. So the finer the point on your pencil will be more detailed the blend. Also, just make sure that you're blending in a small circular motion with your sharpened pencil. Colors that we're going to begin with. So just to get warmed up, let's identify our primary colors. And I want you guys to do some research for the definition of color. And we'll discuss it in a little bit. So what I want you guys to practice here is shading in very small circular motion with a very well sharpened pencil, so you get a nice even blended coat. So your first layer that you apply with color pencil is very important because the texture of that layer will show all the way to the top. We want to work in layers. It's very important to work in transparent layers. This is not a coloring assignment where you go from 1 to 10 really quickly, just like with graphite when you're shading value. You don't want to go to your number 10 value all in one layer. You have to work in layers to build up and get the surface quality that we need, which is a smooth, even surface quality for realism. So no waxy, rushed layers. If you rush through this and try to put every coat on and get the opacity thick all at once, it will show through in the quality of your work. You want to work in very thin, transparent layers. Okay, so to begin, let's go ahead and, using our primaries only on the color wheel, you can use secondaries in other portions of the worksheet if you choose. So I want you guys to take this as a training session. Do these layered, accumulated layers of Prismacolor. You're not rushing and trying to, go all the way across the section all at once. You're taking your time and using these small, tiny circles, which you can add layers to get a more opaque layer. You can just repeat the process. It's always better to add less and you can add more later. It's just like with graphite, it's harder to remove and erase than it is to just add more. Okay, so we're working with primary, secondary, and intermediates. So the red-orange is going to be very dominantly red. So think of it as 75% red, 25% orange. But in this case, we're going to be using yellow. So we're practicing our layering technique. Smooth, even coat for the base layer. If we have rushed, uneven base layers, they'll just show to the top, and then we'll learn the process. So take a well-sharpened yellow, and you don't want to be very heavy-handed with this, you want to just be very light. And we're going to sandwich this yellow between another coat of red. So for this one, we're going to work in 3 layers. And if you need more, you can just keep rotating the 2, red and yellow. need a nice red orange here. I'm going to add a little bit more red on top of that, but for the most part it works really well. But this top coat will blend it a little bit more. And if it starts competing with our red, then we can just add a little bit more yellow to it. We could add a little bit more to the red here to give it more opacity. We can always come back to that later. Okay, so orange is a 50-50 blend here. I will put a thin coat of red first. And then a nice coat of yellow on top. Yellow is very transparent, but will blend in all of this red that's applied. So make sure you're not too heavy-handed with that first coat of red for the orange. If your pencils start to become dull, you can resharpen them. You want to use a hand sharpener with Prismas. The electric sharpeners can get clogged with the beeswax that's in the Prismas. They're made of clay, beeswax, and pigment, so you want to be very careful taking care of your products. Okay, yellow-orange. I'm going to put a very thin coat of red first. I'm going to sharpen my red so that I don't have a splotchy surface, because it's very easy to get a splotchy surface with yellow, orange, and yellow, green. So be very, very light-handed on this. Just barely touching the paper with this red. So we want this to be a nice golden yellow-orange. The more even this red, the more even the yellow-orange will turn out. Okay, once you have this nice golden yellow-orange, make sure you clean off the tip of your yellow so that you don't get any red in your yellow. A nice even coat of yellow here for our primary. And then we will put, we use the True Blue, thin coat of True Blue for the yellow-green. I noticed that this yellow-orange is a little bit splotchy. I was a little heavy in some areas with the red, so sometimes you can get that same thing with the yellow as the first coat. You just have to experiment and see which works best for you. I'm going to put a very thin coat of the yellow-green here. I mean the True Blue for the yellow-green. Okay. So now your green's going to be 50-50, so you can put a little bit heavier coat of the true blue as your base. Remember, you can always add more. Too much will make a blue-green. It's always easier to add more than to take off. We will definitely have a more even green if we add the blue again and rotate these. Remember, working in layers is important. So make sure you don't add too much. You're going for that nice true green. Okay, we're almost ready for the blue-green. Just going to polish this off, the yellow. Okay, for our blue-green, let's add a nice layer of the true blue. Okay, so for blue-green, we want to have a nice layer of the true blue and then a thin layer of the yellow. We can go back and do another layer of blue on top. This should look like a nice aquamarine blue color. Okay, for the rest of this section, I want you guys to follow the same formula for the rest of the color wheel. So for the blue-green, just adding a majority of blue and layering the true blue with the yellow. And of course in the next box, we're just going to have pure true blue. Just adding in layers to increase the opacity. Sharpen your pencil if you need to, if you get a dull tip. Now for the blue-violet, I'm going to put down a really thin red layer first. And then we can layer the true blue on top of that. The set does contain a violet, but remember in this color wheel, we are just using those 3 primary colors. We're limiting ourselves to practice blending and layering. All right, for the violet, add a nice layer of red first, and then we can layer just a little bit of true blue and go back again and sandwich it with some red. Just back and forth with true blue and red. In some cases, if you want to lighten this color, you can add a little bit of white, but for this color wheel, we're just mixing the blue and the red together for the violet. So remember, small, tiny little circles to achieve detailed blends. Sharpen when you need to. For our red violet, it's dominant red, but I'm going to put a thin layer of the true blue first, just to give it that red violet base. And you can add 2 or 3 different layers of the red on top of this to bring out that red violet. Now that you've had some practice with blending using primaries, you can use your secondaries for the remainder of the worksheet. Wheel with only 3 prismas, so give yourself a pat on the back. Okay, so secondary colors. We can use our primary and secondaries to create our secondaries here. Well, we'll put red and yellow, and then yellow and blue, and then blue and violet. I mean blue and red to make violet, so that we'll have green, orange, green, and violet here on the left, or on the right side there. So we will reblend for our intermediates. So for our, it's called tertiary or intermediate colors. I'm going to go ahead and underline those. So those will be our underlined colors, violet, red, violet. So we will recreate those right there. And then I want you guys to think about it as we recreate them again as a review. How did we obtain those intermediate or tertiary colors? So let's go ahead and make note that red and yellow here will create orange. And if you want to just use your primary colors to do this, you can, but I think to go a little bit faster, we could use the secondaries. And we can compare the factory blend with our manually blended. And we still need to discuss the definition of color. So I hope you guys have done your research and looked it up, because we're going to fill it in soon. here's our 3 secondary colors: orange, green, and violet. Let's go ahead and define color. So if you have Googled it and you have found a simple way to word it, I'm just going to put it in as basic as I can. Color is a general term. So color is a general term used to describe every hue, which includes tints, shades, and tones. So that's just the simplest way that I can put it. A general term used to describe every hue, which includes tints, shades, and tones. So let's go ahead and begin our tertiary or intermediate colors. So I've underlined them over here. We have red, orange. I'm going back to just primaries with these, but you can experiment either way with primaries and secondaries, however you like. Next we have yellow, orange. Okay, yellow, orange, and then we have our yellow, green. After yellow green, we have our blue green. So can we tell now how do we make our intermediate or tertiary colors? They are made with the primaries and the secondaries. So if we had blue and green, that's a primary and a secondary. If we had green and yellow, that's a primary and secondary. If we had red and orange, that's a primary and a secondary, and so on. There's our blue violet. And then we want our red violet. So I am going a bit fast mixing these. These are heavier layers than we would normally want, just to achieve the answer here. But for your marble assignment, you're going to need to take your time and work in very thin layers, not rushing it. Okay, so let's go ahead and define our intermediate or tertiary colors. They are created by blending primary and secondary colors. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and fill in our cool and warm colors, splitting the color wheel in half, cool to warm. So all of our cool colors are here on the left and all of our warm colors are here on the right. So pick 3 of each to fill in right there, and then we'll move into complementary colors. So I use the true blue, the grass green, and the apple green for the cool colors. For warm, okay, so now we've separated our cool from warm. Complementary colors. So we've been working with this recently. It's important to know what complementary colors do and how to find them. So we can start by identifying that they are opposites on the color wheel, like red and green. So we can always find them by looking at opposites, so blue and orange, and then we have violet and yellow. Okay, we'll talk about split complementary a little bit further down, but for now, that's the way to find those. So we can just identify that they're opposites on color wheel. And we need to also understand that when they're placed side by side, they make each other look brighter. They complement each other. They make each other pop. And so some of this information you should have viewed already in the PowerPoint, so you're familiar with it. So they are pairs. And when placed together, or side by side, make each other look bright or brighter. Okay, so we'll put in some examples and we're going to wrap up day 1 on this with our complements, and we will continue next time on day 2, beginning with the monochromatic. So go ahead and fill in your complementary colors, and don't forget to upload this to Schoology. Our last set is violet and yellow. Okay, so that is the end of day 1. So we went over our color wheel using primaries. We identified the primaries. We have identified the secondaries. We've identified tertiary or intermediate colors. We've also identified how we create them. And we've talked about color schemes, warm, cool, and complementary color schemes. We will continue this the next following class. So see you.